Hello and welcome to Open Door with Secretary of the Air Force, Deborah Lee James. I'm your host, Staff Sergeant Holly Roberts Davis. Thanks for joining us. This is your opportunity to open the door on hot topics you care about. From balancing the budget to taking care of airmen, you'll get all the answers you're looking for and learn how decisions at the top affect your life in the Air Force. Secretary James, welcome and thank you for spending your time with us today.
Thank you, Holly, and I want to welcome all of the airmen who are with me here in our studio audience at Fort Meade. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to all of our airmen around the country and around the world, many of whom are tuning in today. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you. This week is a special week for me, Holly. It's a special week for me because, you see, this is my first anniversary as being the 23rd Secretary of the Air Force. So I was confirmed by the United States Senate and sworn in just about 1 year ago this week. When I was confirmed back last September, the first thing I did was I established 3 priorities for our Air Force. So these are 3 things that I believe, above all other things, are most important to us, most important to our present day as well as to our future. And those 3 things are, number 1, we need to take care of our people. Number 2, we need to strike the right balance between our readiness needs of today as well as our readiness needs for tomorrow. And that is to say, we need to move toward modernizing our Air Force. And my number 3 priority is in everything we do, we need to make sure that we make every dollar count. We are the smallest Air Force that we have ever been in our history. So that is to say, since we became a separate service in the year 1947, we have fewer people in our Air Force today than ever before in our history. Now that to me is an astonishing statistic, and it is one that I dare say most Americans don't understand. I didn't understand it until I got deeply into it this past year. So we have fewer people. We also have fewer aircraft than we have ever had before. And although our aircraft are much more capable today than they were decades ago, there still becomes a capacity issue because you can't be in multiple places all at the same time. So we have fewer people, we have fewer aircraft. The aircraft that we have are getting older and older. And at the same time all of this is happening, our ops tempo has literally gone through the roof. So our airmen are working very, very hard to protect Americans and American interests. And I want to begin today by thanking all of you for your efforts over this past year. It's phenomenal what I have seen go on, and it's phenomenal that you have done all of this even within this period of what I'm calling a certain amount of strain.
We have a ton of airmen standing by, ready to ask your questions. First, we're actually going to go to Hill Air Force Base. They're actually waiting to ask some questions for you, so you can just look on the monitor and say hello to Hill Air Force Base.
Hey, everybody at Hill.
Morning, ma'am.
Morning.
We've heard a lot about budget cuts, but what units or operations are we currently invested in? Could you highlight a portion of the Air Force that's growing as opposed to downsizing?
Yes, so we are growing in a number of areas. For example, we're growing in ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. And then in our top 3 modernization programs, we're going to certainly stay the course on the Joint Strike Fighter, the new tanker, and the new long-range strike bomber.
Great. I'm sure there's lots of airmen that were wondering where the money is going, so thank you for that information. Right now, we're actually going to check in with Sergeant Richard, and she's going to be in our social media room taking questions, so let's just stop in and see how she's doing in the social media room.
Hey, thanks, Sergeant Roberts Davis. Listen, it's going great in here. I'm in the social media room, and we are standing by, and we're getting questions from airmen from all over the place, so keep those coming. There's a few ways that they can reach us. One is through the SecAF's Facebook page, and that's facebook.com/Deborah.Lee.James. Also on her Twitter page at SecAF23, and whether you comment or post, make sure you use the hashtag SecAFchat. That way we can all stay connected. I'll be monitoring Facebook and Twitter, so Sergeant Roberts Davis, back to you.
Thank you, Sergeant Richard. And now we're going to go ahead and go to a video question, and this one's coming from the UK. So if you just take a look, we'll have a question for you.
Ma'am, what were the 2 biggest shortfalls that you observed caused by the sequestration in 2014, and how would we navigate those in future sequestration and beyond?
Sequestration was a really, really bad deal for our United States Air Force and for our United States military. I dare say it's a bad deal for all of government. So I never miss an opportunity to make the point, and General Welsh always joins me in this, to the Congress, that we have got to get beyond this. We have got to make whatever compromises are necessary in the halls of Congress in order to lift sequestration so that we have the proper amount of resources that we need for our national defense.
Okay, great. And right now we're actually going to go back to social media and we're going to get a question, but I just want to remind the audience that if you have any questions, we will be taking questions from the audience, so keep that in mind. So Sergeant Richard, how are you doing in the social media room?
Hey, things are great here in the social media room. We've had questions that touch on some hot Air Force topic, and this next one here is definitely no different. Secretary James, airmen want to know, why are we cutting personnel in multiple AFSCs, yet are paying bonuses to others to stay in? Why not allow cross-training to balance the force first?
So this is a great question, and it sort of allows me to segue into one of the things that was expected. Remember I said I wanted to talk about expected and unexpected things. So I knew I was going to be working on a very, very tough budgetary environment, and there has been nothing more difficult and more straining, I think, to our airmen than the downsizing that we have been going through. I would like to make a statement about all of this to our airmen around the country and around the world, and obviously to our airmen here at Fort Meade, that throughout my travels, as I have talked to leaders on the scene, as I have talked to airmen, and I have understood more deeply just what this downsizing has meant and the uncertainty that it has brought to so many. And in discussions with General Welsh and other leaders, we have determined that enough is enough. And so contrary to what we said earlier, that there would still be involuntary force shaping in FY15, we have now determined that we will not do involuntary force shaping in FY15. As I said, we are in agreement that enough is enough. We have reduced far enough. We will not go lower, and we will fight to hold on to the numbers now that we have.
Great. I'm sure there are plenty of airmen out there that are very excited to hear that information, especially with the holidays coming up. They can plan a little bit better. Right now, we're going to go to a question from our audience. So if you'd just introduce yourself.
Hi, good morning. I'm Staff Sergeant Forrest Arndt. I work with the 11th Wing WSA Wing Staff Agency at Joint Base Andrews. How you doing, ma'am?
I'm doing great, thank you.
You're welcome. That was my question.
Oh,
No,
great.
it wasn't. I was just going to ask, what's your impression of former Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel, and maybe a reaction or opinion of his relatively short tenure in that service? So.
Allows me to segue to one of my unexpected things of the past year. So, of course, Secretary Hagel is our Secretary of Defense and will remain our Secretary of Defense until a successor is confirmed, and we do have a successor who is nominated, Dr. Ashton Carter, and with a bit of luck and assuming the confirmation process goes smoothly, I would anticipate a January-February timeframe that he could be confirmed as the next Secretary of Defense. So to answer your question, I'm a big admirer of Secretary Hagel. I think it's a very difficult job that he has, that we all have, but most especially our Secretary of Defense, because you see, like me in my position, he also has many of the budgetary issues that he concerns himself about. He represents to the Congress, talks about our resources, but unlike me, he is charged with the very, very serious duty of making decisions about when to send U.S. servicemen and women into harm's way. So he and the chairman, of course, are the direct advisors to the president about these very weighty matters. So I think he's done an excellent job. Secretary Hagel will be the first one to remind us that we need to keep working, keep our nose to the grindstone, so to speak, and not to miss a beat, because of course leaders change, both civilian and military leaders, but our charge is to keep on marching.
Well, now it's actually time for our Skype question. So we are going to go to Skype. We have Airman First Class Zachary Boyer.
All right.
He's calling in from Ramstein Air Base in Germany, and he has a question for you. Airman Boyer, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, how are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
All right, I'm doing well. Go ahead with your question.
All right, ma'am, with all the budget cuts lately, I've heard there are proposed cuts to BAH and pay. Is there any plans to counteract the negative effects and lowered morale this decision can cause?
We now have some decisions, actually, from the Congress, just hot off of the presses, you might say, because Congress did pass the annual defense authorization bill and appropriation bill just within the last few days. There shall be a 1% pay raise next year, and rather than the BAH increases but covering 97%, there will be increases to cover 99%. So those are the final outcomes. It is still going up. I want to emphasize that, not being cut. It just won't go up as much as it otherwise would have under the automatic adjustments.
With that, we're going to go to another social media question. And so let's check in with Sergeant Richard in the social media room.
Hey, how's it going? We definitely have a lot more questions coming in, and this next one is from Airmen, and they are wondering, what is the SECAF's vision for the infrastructure and the leadership integrity of our nuclear forces?
The nuclear enterprise is our #1 mission in the Air Force, and the vision is we have got to match those words with everything that we do in terms of manning, resources, policy, the climate at these locations. All of this must match up over time. At the moment, it's not fully matched up, and we need to work on that. 99.9% of all of our airmen have the highest integrity. They are doing the right thing day in and day out. And of course, there's always that very, very small percentage that let us down. And when that happens, there has to be appropriate accountability, and certainly there was in that case of the Malmstrom situation. But for the future, we're an Air Force of high integrity, and in terms of the nuclear enterprise, we are going to increasingly put our money where our mouth is so that the infrastructure and the manning and so forth will all come up over time to reflect that.
Great. Thank you for that information. And we're going to go now to an audience question. So if you could introduce yourself, please.
Hello, ma'am. Master Sergeant David, American Forces Radio and Television Service. My question would be, with as many things that are happening in today's Air Force, with ISIL and with budgetary cuts and even the nuclear force, there's the haunting presence of a country in Eastern Europe that rhymes with Russia. And I was wondering where your stance was, your opinion on where's our way forward?
The actions of Russia have been very, very worrying over the last year. And of course, the United States, in a whole-of-government approach, has been taking actions. There have been diplomatic actions where, of course, there have been sanctions placed upon individuals and entities in Russia in response to their action. And then there have been actions that we have taken to reinforce and reassure our allies, because of course our NATO alliance is extremely important to us, will remain extremely important in the future. And so I would predict what you're going to see now over time is you're going to see the United States do more rotational assignments in Europe. So for example, we in the Air Force, we have F-15s in the UK. Those F-15s were originally scheduled to come out and perhaps be redistributed across the force in the United States. That now is not going to happen, at least not in the next year. So those F-15s will remain in Europe. We're going to continue to do the Baltic policing mission. There will probably be more rotational assignments for our Army in Europe. So we stand by NATO, and there will be a variety of ways that that becomes more and more clear as time goes by. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Thank you for stopping by and spending time with us today.
Appreciate it, Holly. Thanks.
Yep.
Thanks so much to you.
Yes, thanks. To catch the full version of today's live broadcast, you can head over to the Air Force BlueTube page at youtube.com/AFBlueTube. For more from the Secretary, you can find her on Facebook at facebook.com/Deborah.Lee.James, and you can also follow her on Twitter at SecAF23. For this edition of Open Door with Secretary of the Air Force Deborah Lee James, I'm Staff Sergeant Holly Roberts Davis. Thanks for watching.